In the outskirts of New England, hidden beneath overgrown ivy and shattered glass, stands a mansion untouched since 1897. Its walls have absorbed a century of silence, yet locals whisper of movement within, shadows that shift at midnight, doors that creak open on their own, and the faint echo of footsteps along the grand staircase. Explorers who dared to enter claim objects rearrange themselves, portraits gazing down with uncanny awareness. What dark secrets remain frozen in time behind these decaying walls? And why does it feel somehow as if the house itself is watching, waiting for something only it knows? The mansion's history begins with the Sinclairs, a family whose name was synonymous with wealth, influence, and a certain unspoken darkness that seemed to linger around the edges of their public lives. In the late 19th century, they were a household both admired and whispered about in the town. Henry Sinclair, the patriarch, was a man of imposing presence, tall, sharply dressed, with eyes that seemed to pierce through any pretense. His wife, Margaret, was noted for her beauty and poise, though behind her delicate smile lay a temperament described by servants as unpredictable, almost spectral. Their children, 4 in total, were both the pride and obsession of the household, each groomed meticulously to continue the family's legacy. Yet beneath the gilded veneer of opulence, tension simmered, growing heavier with each passing year. The mansion itself was a physical manifestation of the Sinclair family's ambition and wealth. Built from imported stone, its facade was adorned with intricate carvings, gargoyles perched like silent sentinels over the overgrown gardens, and balconies that overlooked acres of meticulously planned grounds. Inside, the house was even more lavish, a labyrinth of rooms designed not merely for comfort but to impress, intimidate, and some whispered to isolate. Secret corridors were rumored to exist, connecting the study to the servants' quarters, allowing the family to observe without being seen. Every object, from the gold-rimmed china to the hand-carved mahogany furniture, spoke of a life steeped in extravagance but shadowed by unspoken rules and expectations. By 1897, the cracks in the family's image of perfection were becoming impossible to ignore. Henry's strict control over his children, particularly his eldest son Edward, led to constant conflict. Servants recall heated arguments echoing through the halls, often ending abruptly as if someone, perhaps Henry himself, had struck a deal with silence. Margaret, for her part, became increasingly withdrawn, rumored to wander the corridors late at night in sorrow or fear. Some townspeople claimed to have seen her standing at the mansion's highest balcony, staring down into the fog-shrouded gardens with a gaze that seemed fixed on some invisible terror. The last documented evening inside the mansion is shrouded in ambiguity. The Sinclairs hosted a formal dinner, attended only by family members and a few trusted servants. Witnesses report that the atmosphere was unusually tense, conversations clipped, and glances exchanged like weapons. There was no record of any visitors after dusk. The following morning, the town awoke to an impossible reality. The mansion stood as it always had, doors locked, fires extinguished, but the entire Sinclair family had vanished. Their beds were unmade, dinnerware left on tables, and personal belongings scattered as if frozen in time. It was as though the house itself had swallowed them whole. Historians and researchers who have delved into the Sinclair archives uncover more peculiar details. Letters hint at secret dealings, business conflicts that may have carried dangerous consequences, and a network of debts and rivalries extending beyond the town. Some entries, written in Edward Sinclair's hand, suggest fear of someone or something that was coming for the family. Margaret's diaries, preserved by a later caretaker, speak cryptically of eyes in the walls and the house breathing at night, phrases that blur the line between paranoia and premonition. Over the decades, the mansion's frozen state has become almost legendary. Photographs from the early 20th century show the property unchanged, as if the Sinclairs themselves had pressed pause on time. The eerie perfection of the home, combined with the complete absence of its residents, has fascinated and unnerved generations of townspeople. Scholars debate whether the disappearance was a carefully orchestrated escape, a tragic accident, or something far stranger. The mansion remains, a sentinel of history, holding within its walls the last echoes of a family that vanished without explanation. Explorers, historians, and the occasional thrill-seeker who have dared to step inside the Sinclair mansion describe experiences that defy logic, leaving them questioning not only what they saw but whether they truly entered the realm of the living at all. The first accounts come from the early 20th century when local curiosity prompted brave or perhaps foolhardy individuals to pry open the mansion's rusted gates. Those who entered often speak first of an overwhelming sensation, a heaviness in the air as though the walls themselves exhaled centuries of confinement and grief. The moment they crossed the threshold, the house seemed to acknowledge them, shifting imperceptibly, whispering through the creaking floorboards and nudging objects into new arrangements as if testing the audacity of intruders. One of the earliest recorded incidents involved a historian named Charles Whitman, who in 1923 ventured inside to document the architecture. Whitman reported that as he moved through the grand foyer, a large portrait of Henry Sinclair appeared to tilt toward him ever so slightly, the eyes following his every step. He described hearing the faint scuff of slippers in the corridor above, though the upper floors were long inaccessible due to collapsed stairways. When he attempted to ascend despite the danger, the air grew inexplicably cold, and he felt a sudden, almost physical, push against his back, forcing him to retreat. In his journal he noted with trembling hand that it felt as if the mansion itself were aware of my intentions and displeased. Decades later, in the 1960s, a group of amateur paranormal investigators entered with cameras and rudimentary recording equipment. They found that objects shifted overnight, often returning to precise positions when no one was present to manipulate them. A small chair moved inches across the dusty floor, a teacup spun slowly in place, and a music box, untouched, began to play in the dead hours. The recordings captured faint, unintelligible whispers that seemed to weave between the walls, sometimes echoing through the grand hall in the cadence of conversation. Witnesses claimed that on several occasions the chandeliers swung as if disturbed by an unseen hand, and doors slammed shut moments after being opened, leaving investigators huddled in fear, unsure whether to flee or continue documenting. More recent visitors recount similar, if not more alarming, experiences. Modern explorers equipped with flashlights and night vision cameras report shadows moving in ways inconsistent with natural light, figures glimpsed in mirrors and windows that vanish when approached, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps pacing through rooms left empty for over a century. One filmmaker attempting a full-night documentary recalls watching a chair slowly rock back and forth as if someone had just stood from it, yet every room remained empty. Another describes the pervasive feeling of being observed, not by a living presence but by the house itself, as though the walls held a collective consciousness of the family that once resided there. Eyewitness accounts often converge on the idea that the mansion is not merely haunted by ghosts but is actively engaged in a dialogue with those who enter. Some visitors speak of fleeting glimpses of Margaret Sinclair, a figure in period dress, gliding silently along hallways. Others mention Edward, whose face appears in fleeting reflections, watching intently. Even the bravest describe a sense of temporal distortion. Clocks stop or run backward. Footsteps echo in irregular rhythms, and rooms feel simultaneously vast and confining. What emerges from these accounts is a pattern of interaction that defies conventional understanding. The house appears to respond selectively, reacting to curiosity, fear, or disrespect, almost as if it is aware of the intentions of intruders. Items shift, doors lock and unlock themselves, and whispers echo, sometimes urgent, sometimes accusatory, but always insistently present. The phenomenon is consistent enough that anyone entering the mansion, regardless of the era, finds themselves confronted not with empty silence, but with a living, breathing mystery that has persisted for more than a century. The mansion itself is a character in the unfolding mystery, a labyrinthine monument to an era of extravagance now decayed and ominous. Every corridor, staircase, and chamber tells a story of its own, steeped in a sense of permanence and dread. The ceilings, once painted with intricate frescoes of pastoral scenes and mythological figures, have begun to peel and crumble, revealing dark water stains that twist like spectral hands across the plaster. Chandeliers hang precariously, their crystals coated in a century of dust, catching the sparse light in fractured patterns that dance eerily across the walls. Carpets, once rich with deep crimson and gold, lie moth-eaten and faded, yet retain the echo of footsteps long past. Walking through these spaces feels like trespassing in a memory that refuses to die, as if the house itself has trapped the world of 1897 inside its walls. Rooms are arranged with meticulous symmetry, reflecting the wealth and rigid discipline of the Sinclair family. The drawing room, for example, is dominated by a massive fireplace, its mantel carved with snarling faces that seem to watch visitors with a quiet malice. Portraits of the family line the walls in gilded frames, their painted eyes unnervingly lifelike, following any movement in the room. Each chamber holds objects left as they were, frozen in a domestic tableau, a tea set on a small table, spoons perfectly aligned, an open ledger on a writing desk, ink still visible on the pages, though time has yellowed them, a music box with its lid propped half open, silent, yet always ready to spring to life. It is a preservation of both beauty and unease, a careful suspension of domesticity and fear. The mansion's architectural secrets only deepen the sense of mystery. Narrow, concealed staircases snake between floors, often leading to small hidden chambers. Servants' passages are tucked behind walls of fine oak, allowing unseen movement throughout the house. Some explorers claim these secret corridors amplify the eerie phenomena, with sounds, footsteps, whispers, doors creaking, seemingly coming from spaces that are impossible to access. Rooms that appear ordinary by daylight transform under the ghostly play of shadows at night. Mirrors, once intended to brighten halls or expand living spaces, seem to warp reality, reflecting figures that vanish when approached, or echoing gestures that never occurred. The kitchen and service areas are particularly unnerving, filled with artifacts that hint at the daily life of the Sinclairs but now carry an air of spectral stillness. Copper pots and pans are polished but untouched. Knives rest in precise alignment, and the pantry shelves still hold tins and containers, some labeled in fading script, some with contents long spoiled. It is as if the house intended for no one to touch these items, preserving them as evidence of a life abandoned in panic or terror. The air here is heavy, scented faintly with the residue of meals long decayed, an invisible memory of culinary labor performed under unseen scrutiny. Even the mansion's exterior contributes to the oppressive aura. Balconies jut outward like skeletal arms, casting long shadows across the overgrown gardens. Stained glass windows depict allegorical scenes, fractured by cracks that scatter sunlight into spectral prisms on the floors below. Ivy crawls relentlessly across stonework, wrapping gargoyles and columns in thick green ropes, softening the edges of the house while adding a sense of encroaching menace. In some sections, entire wings have begun to collapse inward, revealing glimpses of rooms suspended like frozen dioramas, furniture tipped at unnatural angles, as though the house itself was shifting in response to the passage of time, or to those who dared to observe it. The mansion is more than a structure. It is a repository of memory, fear, and intent. Every surface, from the polished banisters to the crumbling ceiling cornices, holds evidence of both grandeur and decay. Time has not erased the presence of the Sinclair family. It has amplified it, imbuing the house with an almost sentient awareness. It is a place where architecture and history intertwine, where human design and supernatural suggestion collide, creating an environment that is both captivating and terrifying. For anyone walking its halls, it becomes impossible to distinguish between what is preserved by human hands and what is preserved by something far older, far more deliberate. The nocturnal phenomena reported in the Sinclair mansion have become the stuff of legend, the kind of events that make even seasoned investigators hesitate before stepping across its threshold. Those who enter after dusk speak of a world that seems to operate by rules entirely different from the waking one. Doors, once securely latched, will creak open as if nudged by unseen hands, and then swing slowly back and forth, whispering in the darkness like the sigh of a living being. Footsteps echo across the grand hallways, soft and deliberate, sometimes matching the rhythm of the observer's own heart. yet never belonging to any visible occupant. Even the slightest movement can trigger subtle disturbances, chairs sliding a few inches, curtains twitching as if someone has brushed past them, objects left on tables rotated or displaced, as though the house itself is testing intruders' attention to detail. One investigator described an experience in which a long corridor, lined with faded portraits, seemed to stretch impossibly, the end receding into shadows that refused illumination. As he walked, the portrait's eyes appeared to shift subtly, tracking his every step. At precisely midnight, the chandelier above him swung violently, though no draft or vibration could account for it. The air grew inexplicably cold, each breath visible like smoke, and a low, almost mournful moan echoed from deep within the walls. When he reached the corridor's end, he found a chair that had previously been placed neatly against the wall toppled across the floor, the pattern of its fall suggesting deliberate placement rather than chance. In his notes he wrote simply, "The house watches, and it moves when it pleases." Other accounts describe more intimate disturbances. A small group of visitors reported sitting in the drawing room when a music box, untouched for decades, began playing a distorted melody, the delicate notes seeming to stretch and warp in the still air. At the same time, shadows moved independently of any light source, flickering across walls and floors in patterns that suggested deliberate movement rather than randomness. A mirror reflected not the room as it was, but an altered scene, curtains swaying, furniture displaced, and in the corner a figure barely discernible, standing motionless before vanishing the instant it was noticed directly. These phenomena were consistent enough that investigators began documenting them, noting recurring patterns of objects shifting, lights dimming, and sounds echoing in precise, unnatural rhythms. The mansion's upper floors are particularly active after dark. Staircases creak under invisible weight, while rooms long considered inaccessible produce sounds of doors opening and closing, as if the house itself is rehearsing some forgotten domestic ritual. Visitors describe the sensation of being followed, footsteps pacing behind them even when no one is there, a pressure at their back that grows heavier in certain hallways. One paranormal team captured on film a rocking chair swaying back and forth in the library, despite its location in a sealed room. When they entered, the chair stopped immediately, but the video footage showed it moving moments before anyone entered, leaving them with the inescapable conclusion that the mansion responds to presence in ways beyond ordinary understanding. Even objects seem to act as conduits for the house's activity. Books fall from shelves with pages open to passages no one could have anticipated. Silverware rearranges itself on tables, and paintings tilt subtly, their frames realigning as though correcting some imperfection only the mansion notices. Whispers, faint but insistent, often accompany these movements, echoing through rooms in tones that mimic conversation yet never resolve into coherent words. Those who linger report a sense of intelligence behind the disturbances, as if the house is aware not only of human trespass but of the intentions of those within it, reacting in ways that blend caution, curiosity, and warning. Some theorists suggest the phenomena are linked to the unresolved fate of the Sinclair family, the mansion functioning as both mausoleum and stage for their last moments. Others argue for a more supernatural reading, that the house has absorbed the emotional energy of tragedy and now animates itself in response to anyone daring to tread its floors. Regardless of interpretation, one fact is undeniable. After dark, the Sinclair mansion is alive in a way that defies conventional explanation, a place where inanimate objects acquire agency, and the line between the living and the preserved past blurs with chilling precision. The Sinclair mansion is surrounded by whispers and half-remembered tales, legends that have grown darker with each passing decade. Long before the house gained notoriety among explorers and historians, locals spoke in hushed tones about a curse, a malevolent force tied to the family's sudden disappearance. They claimed that the mansion had been marked by tragedy from its very inception, that something unseen lingered in the shadows of its ornate corridors, waiting to claim those who dared intrude upon its secrets. Farmers passing near the estate at twilight would swear that lights flickered in the windows even though the house had long been abandoned, and some said they could hear a faint melody, like a music box drifting from the property, though no human presence was ever evident. The stories often centered on the Sinclairs themselves. Some said Henry Sinclair had made enemies whose revenge extended beyond the bounds of the mortal world, that the family's wealth and ambition had stirred something unnatural, something that exacted a slow, inexorable punishment. Others spoke of Margaret, whose secret grief and whispered incantations during moments of despair were said to have invoked forces beyond comprehension. Children wandering near the estate reported seeing fleeting figures in period dress, standing at windows or along balcony edges, vanishing the moment anyone tried to approach. Animals, too, behaved strangely. Dogs refused to cross the threshold, livestock would grow agitated when the mansion came into view, and birds avoided the gardens entirely, as if instinctively aware that the land itself was tainted by history. One particularly persistent legend involves the midnight vigil, a phenomenon said to occur on nights when the moon is hidden behind clouds. Locals claim that if someone stands near the mansion's gates at the stroke of 12, they might hear the echo of a grand dinner, the clinking of cutlery, laughter, and murmured conversations replaying the final evening of the Sinclairs. These phantom sounds are never complete. They begin abruptly and fade just as suddenly, leaving witnesses unnerved and sometimes physically ill. Some who experienced this phenomenon reported seeing shadows flit past windows or the silhouette of a woman pacing in the upper halls, only to disappear entirely when investigated. Stories like these have persisted for more than a century, cementing the mansion's reputation as a locus of both historical intrigue and supernatural dread. There are also tales of the house responding to human intent, of objects moving or rearranging themselves when disrespectful or curious eyes trespass inside. A local myth holds that the mansion judges its visitors, punishing those who enter without reverence or caution. Chairs rock as if someone has just risen, portraits tilt, and doors close with deliberate force. Investigators who have tried to catalog these occurrences often find their equipment malfunctioning, lights flickering, and recordings capturing sounds that cannot be traced to any source. Even the most skeptical scholars admit that the consistency of these reports over decades defies simple explanation, suggesting that the house, and perhaps the force within, interacts with the living in a conscious, calculated manner. Legends also describe an invisible barrier surrounding the property, a psychological force that dissuades entry. Many who attempt to approach the mansion find themselves overcome with unease, second-guessing their motives or feeling as though unseen eyes are watching their every movement. Some retreat without ever crossing the threshold, reporting sensations of dizziness, pressure, or a chilling weight on the chest. These accounts, while anecdotal, are remarkably uniform, adding to the sense that the mansion is protected by more than locks and gates. Over time, the curse has taken on a mythic dimension, intertwining the house's physical presence with the fears and imaginations of generations. The Sinclair mansion has become more than a site of disappearance. It is a repository of folklore, where cautionary tales, family history, and the inexplicable converge. The weight of these legends permeates every brick and beam, ensuring that anyone who ventures near cannot easily separate fact from fiction. In the collective memory of the town and beyond, the mansion is both a monument to tragedy and a living testament to the unknown forces that seem to linger, undisturbed, yet ever present within its decaying walls. The mysteries of the Sinclair mansion have long drawn not just curiosity but speculation, and over the decades theorists have tried to connect the house's strange phenomena to the turbulent history surrounding the family. Some suggest that the unexplained movements, sounds, and apparitions are not mere hauntings but echoes of historical events that left indelible marks upon the property. The Sinclairs, after all, were not an ordinary family. Their wealth derived from a combination of land speculation, banking, and sometimes morally dubious dealings that drew resentment and rivalry. Financial disputes escalated into threats, and some letters preserved from the period hint at clandestine agreements and bitter betrayals, providing fertile ground for those who believe that the mansion's disturbances are tied to unresolved earthly grievances. One line of theory focuses on the family's disappearance itself, linking it to a potential crime or tragedy that never came to light. Edward Sinclair, the eldest son, had expressed anxiety in his private journals, noting that certain individuals had been watching too closely and that secrets might be forced into the open. Historians have suggested that the final night of the family's existence may have ended in a violent confrontation that was carefully concealed, or that the family's departure, whether voluntary or forced, left an imprint of fear and turmoil on the mansion's structure. This theory is supported by early reports of disturbed servants who recalled hearing unusual noises in the hours before the family vanished, along with the unsettling discovery of the house locked from the inside, furniture misplaced, and objects left in precarious positions as if frozen in the moments immediately following chaos. Another prominent theory involves the idea of emotional energy, a psychological and metaphysical interpretation. Researchers in parapsychology suggest that spaces where intense emotions occur, anger, fear, grief, and despair, can become repositories for that energy, sometimes manifesting in physical disturbances. The Sinclair mansion, with its documented arguments, personal losses, and possible tragedies, is often cited as a prime example. Visitors report that the house seems to react to their emotional states. Those approaching with curiosity or disrespect encounter heightened activity, while those who move carefully and respectfully experience subtler phenomena. It is as if the house has absorbed not only the events of the past, but the emotional weight of those who lived and disappeared within it, replaying it through objects, shadows, and inexplicable sounds. Some theories go further, linking the mansion's activity to broader historical events. The late 19th century was a period of social upheaval, industrial expansion, and regional unrest in the area. The Sinclairs, deeply entwined in local politics and economic ventures, may have been caught in conflicts that escalated beyond their control. Historians have speculated that rivalries over land, wealth, or inheritance could have resulted in threats to the family that left an imprint on the mansion's atmosphere, a lingering tension encoded into the structure itself. In this view, the house acts as both witness and participant, retaining the memory of these tensions long after the events themselves faded from human consciousness. Modern investigators have sought empirical connections between the house's disturbances and historical documentation. Diaries, letters, and architectural records often correspond in curious ways to reported phenomena. Footsteps in the library, for example, coincide with the location of past family disputes documented in letters. Objects that shift or fall often relate to areas where critical conversations or events took place. Even the placement of hidden rooms and secret passages aligns with theories of surveillance and conflict within the household. The pattern is striking enough to suggest that the house may be more than a passive container of history, instead functioning as a vessel in which human drama continues to unfold, centuries after its creators vanished. For some, these theories provide a framework to understand the mansion's enduring power. They hint that the strange occurrences are not random but deeply connected to the lives, choices, and misfortunes of the Sinclair family, echoing both their personal history and the societal pressures surrounding them. The disturbances become intelligible, not as isolated hauntings, but as a continuum of past events reverberating through space and time, leaving traces that modern observers cannot ignore. Over the decades, countless investigators, historians, and thrill-seekers have attempted to document the Sinclair mansion, each driven by curiosity, ambition, or a desire to understand the inexplicable. Their experiences reveal not only the mansion's uncanny activity but also the chilling consequences of trying to penetrate its secrets. Early in the 20th century, local historians equipped with notebooks and cameras sought to catalog the home's architecture and artifacts. They were immediately confronted by the house's odd responsiveness. Chairs would shift between rooms overnight, ladders tipped over for no apparent reason, and open journals were discovered on the floor, pages scrawled in handwriting that belonged to no visitor. These subtle manipulations, often dismissed at first as coincidence or prank, soon revealed a deliberate intelligence embedded within the house itself. By the 1930s, amateur paranormal investigators began venturing into the mansion with flashlights, rudimentary cameras, and audio equipment. They reported phenomena that defied conventional explanation: doors locked and unlocked of their own accord, chandeliers swinging despite total stillness in the air, and footsteps that echoed in perfect rhythm behind observers, vanishing whenever they turned to investigate. One group documented a rocking chair moving across the parlor, yet when they entered, no wind, no mechanism, no human presence could account for it. Frustration gave way to fear as subtle incidents escalated into encounters that left even seasoned investigators shaken. Some spoke of whispered voices calling their names, or the sensation of being followed by unseen figures pacing in the hallways. Attempts to record the mansion's activity with cameras and audio devices have yielded perplexing results. Photographs often reveal fleeting shadows that vanish upon closer inspection, and objects appear in frames in positions different from those recorded by previous photographs. Audio recordings capture indistinct murmurs and low hums, sometimes rising to a crescendo before abruptly cutting off. Some investigators noted that these phenomena seem to respond to observation. Objects stop moving when actively watched, and sounds fade when attention is focused directly on them. This has led some researchers to propose that the mansion is aware of human presence, interacting selectively with those who intrude upon its preserved reality. Modern investigators have attempted more sophisticated studies, employing night vision cameras, motion detectors, and thermal imaging. Yet even with advanced technology, the mansion proves elusive. Hallways appear empty in one camera while shadows flicker in another. Thermal sensors register bursts of heat without visible cause, as if some residual energy of the past manifests intermittently. Motion detectors trigger with no discernible movement, and devices malfunction unpredictably. Several researchers report equipment failures that occur only inside the mansion, a phenomenon consistent enough to suggest that the disturbances are more than coincidental. The human cost of investigation is equally troubling. Many visitors experience intense psychological effects, dizziness, disorientation, sudden fatigue, and feelings of oppressive anxiety. Some have reported vivid nightmares following even brief visits, dreams in which the mansion's halls extend endlessly, populated by spectral figures that move and watch. A handful of explorers have sworn they saw members of the Sinclair family themselves, dressed in period clothing, frozen mid-action, only to vanish when approached. These experiences blur the line between memory, hallucination, and something undeniably real, leaving investigators uncertain of what is tangible and what is imagined. Local authorities have sometimes attempted to intervene, documenting trespass and potential hazard, yet even official reports carry traces of the mansion's inexplicability. Police logs mention inexplicable noises, objects moved between rooms, and officers reporting a profound sense of being observed. In every instance, those who spend time within the mansion's walls emerge with consistent accounts. The house is alive, in some sense preserving and interacting with the history it contains. Even repeated attempts at mapping, photographing, or cataloging the property cannot fully capture it. Each exploration produces new anomalies, new evidence of subtle movement or intelligence. The mansion seems impervious to scientific or historical scrutiny, as if it deliberately deflects understanding, preserving the mystery of the Sinclair family and their sudden disappearance. Each investigation, regardless of era or technology, confirms one unshakable truth: the mansion is not merely a building frozen in time. It is an active participant in its own story, shaping the experiences of those who dare to uncover its secrets. As the fog settles once more over the Sinclair mansion, its walls silent yet alive with memory, one can't help but wonder, what truly lingers in the shadows of a home frozen in time? Was it the family's secrets, the weight of their fears, or something older, something patient that refuses to let go? Each creak, each whisper, each fleeting shadow you've heard about tonight reminds us that history is never fully gone. It waits, observes, and sometimes reaches out in ways we cannot explain. If this story left your heart racing, your mind turning over questions too unsettling to ignore, then you are not alone. There are countless untold tales like this, each hidden in forgotten estates, abandoned towns, and the dark corners of history. By subscribing, You ensure you'll be the first to uncover the next mystery, where the line between fact and fear blurs, and where the past refuses to remain buried. And we want to hear from you. Could the mansion itself hold consciousness? Do some tragedies imprint on the very walls that witnessed them? Share your thoughts, your theories, or even your own encounters with the unknown in the comments below. Every reflection brings us closer to understanding the secrets that history and darkness keeps hidden.